Everyone in the valley called it the flooded farm. The river ran close to the land, and for 2 years it had overflowed again and again. Each time, it left behind muddy water, broken wood, and thick sand. When the water finally went down, the fields looked tired and sick. The fences were leaning. The fruit trees had yellow leaves. The farmhouse stood there like it was holding its breath, with a dark watermark across the front wall. No one wanted it anymore. People talked about it at the small grocery store, at the tea stall, and outside the repair shop. They said the land would never grow good crops again. They said the river would come back next year and take more. Some even said the farm brought bad luck. When the owner left, the farm became quiet, like a place that had been forgotten. Then one day, a man named Tom came to see it. Tom was not rich. He did not wear fancy clothes. His boots were old, and his jacket had a small tear on the sleeve. But his eyes were sharp, and his face was calm. He had worked on other people's farms for years. He saved money slowly, coin by coin. He wanted his own land, even if it was not perfect. When he heard the flooded farm was selling for almost nothing, he did not laugh like others did. He listened. He asked questions. He drove to the valley early in the morning, while the fog still sat low over the road. The farm looked worse in real life. The driveway was full of small stones and soft mud. The grass was too tall. The front steps were cracked. Tom walked around the house without speaking. He touched the wood on the porch. It felt rough and swollen. He looked at the roof, then the windows, then the corner of the house where the paint had peeled away. Behind the house, the barn stood like a dark giant. It was big, but it leaned slightly to one side, like it was tired. The barn doors were shut, and sand had piled up against the bottom of them. Tom stared at the barn for a long moment. He did not feel fear. He felt something else, something quiet and heavy. He could not explain it, but it was like the farm was hiding a story. A man from the town office came with papers, and the deal was quick. The price was low because nobody wanted the risk. Tom signed the papers with a steady hand. When it was done, the farm was his. That night, Tom did not sleep inside the house. The smell of damp wood and old water was strong. The air felt cold and stale. Instead, he slept in his truck, wrapped in a blanket. The wind moved through the trees, and the barn creaked once, softly, as if it was breathing. Tom woke up early the next morning. The sky was gray, and the land was quiet. He ate a simple breakfast, then walked the fields. His boots sank into soft ground. He saw lines where the water had pushed through the soil. He saw small piles of sand that did not belong in a farm field. He saw broken fence pieces half buried like old bones. It would take a lot of work to fix this place. Still, Tom did not turn back. He believed land could heal with time. He believed hard work could turn loss into something useful. He had seen worse. He had started with less. After checking the fields, he walked toward the barn. The closer he got, the more he noticed the sand. It was everywhere around the barn doors, like a small desert had formed at the entrance. Tom pulled on the doors. At first, they did not move. He pushed harder, and the doors opened with a long, rough sound. Sand slid out and spilled onto the ground in front of him. Inside, the barn was dim. Thin light came through cracks in the wood. The smell was a mix of wet sand, old hay, and rust. The floor was not visible. Sand covered it, thick and high, like the barn had been filled from the bottom up. Tom stepped in carefully. He expected to see a mess. Floods usually throw everything around. He thought there would be broken boards, mud, and junk scattered everywhere. But the sand inside was strange. It was smooth and packed down. It rose in a gentle slope toward the back wall. It looked almost planned, like someone had leveled it with care. Tom frowned. He walked a few steps forward and crouched down. He grabbed a handful of sand. It was fine and clean, not mixed with sticks or trash. That was odd. Flood sand usually carried leaves, dirt, and pieces of plants. This sand looked like it came from a clean place. Tom let the sand fall through his fingers. A small cold feeling moved in his chest, the kind that comes when something does not make sense. He told himself it was nothing. Floods do strange things, he thought. Water can push sand in many ways. Maybe it just settled like this. But he could not ignore the feeling. Tom went back to his truck and brought a shovel. He returned to the barn and chose a spot near the center, where the sand looked the most level. He pushed the shovel into the sand. It was harder than he expected. He pressed down with his foot. The shovel went in, but it felt like the sand was packed tightly, almost like it had been pressed and left to sit for a long time. He lifted a heavy scoop and threw it to the side. He dug again. After a few minutes, the shovel hit something with a sharp sound. Tom stopped moving. He listened. The barn was silent except for his breathing. He pushed the shovel gently, scraping the sand away. The sound came again. It was not wood. It was not stone. It was metal. Tom's heartbeat grew louder. He brushed away sand with his hands. His fingers touched something cold and solid. A flat edge appeared under the sand, straight and smooth. Tom stared at it, not speaking. He had never seen anything like this in a barn floor. It looked like a metal surface, wide and strong, buried carefully under the sand. The flood had not broken it. The flood had not moved it. Instead, the sand had covered it, hiding it like a secret. Tom pulled his hands back. His mind filled with questions. Was it part of an old machine? Was it a hidden storage space? Was it something placed here on purpose? Why was it under the barn? Why did nobody talk about it? He looked around the barn, as if someone might be watching. Of course, no one was there. The farm was alone. Still, Tom felt like the air had changed. The barn felt less empty now, like it was holding something it did not want to show. Tom made a choice. He did not dig more right away. He did not want to rush. He used his hands to push sand back over the metal edge until it was hidden again. Then he smoothed the top so it looked untouched. When he stepped out of the barn, the cold air hit his face. He closed the doors and stood there for a moment. The sun tried to break through the clouds, but the light stayed weak. That night, Tom sat in his truck with a small lamp. He tried to eat, but his mind was not calm. He kept thinking about the metal under the sand. He kept seeing the straight edge, the way it caught the light for a second. He told himself he would sleep and think in the morning. But sleep did not come easily. Outside, the wind touched the barn again, and the barn made a low sound, like an old warning. Tom stared out at the dark shape of it and made a promise to himself. Tomorrow, he would dig deeper. And whatever was hidden under the sand, he would find out the truth. Tom woke before sunrise. The sky outside his truck was pale blue, and the air felt cold and sharp. He sat still for a moment, listening. The farm was quiet. No birds yet. No wind. Just silence, heavy and watchful. His thoughts went straight to the barn. He tried to calm himself. He told himself the metal could be part of an old farming tool, maybe a broken water tank or a forgotten machine. Still, the way it was buried did not feel normal. It felt careful. It felt hidden. Tom stepped out of the truck and stretched. His breath came out in small clouds. He made simple tea using his small stove and drank it slowly, staring at the barn while the steam rose. The barn stood there, dark and solid, as if it knew he was coming back. After breakfast, Tom grabbed his shovel, a small hand rake, and a flashlight. He walked to the barn with steady steps. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he did not stop. He opened the barn doors again. Sand slid forward softly, whispering as it fell. Inside, the light was dim, but his eyes had already learned the space. He walked to the spot he had covered the day before and knelt down. Tom brushed the sand away with his hands. The metal edge appeared again, just as he remembered. It was flat and wide, with a dull gray color. It did not look rusty. That surprised him. Most metal left in a wet place would show damage. This looked strong and clean. Tom picked up the shovel and worked slowly. He dug around the metal, careful not to scratch it. Scoop by scoop, he cleared the sand. The deeper he went, the more he saw. The metal was not small. It stretched farther than he thought. It was shaped like a large plate, set into the ground. As he uncovered more, he noticed lines along the edges, straight and clean, like seams. Tom wiped his forehead with his sleeve. This was not farm junk. After almost an hour of digging, the shape became clear. It was a large metal door, set flat into the barn floor. Thick. Heavy. Built to last. A metal ring sat near one edge, half buried. Tom stared at it. A door under a barn made no sense. Barns were built for animals, tools, and hay. Not hidden rooms. Not metal doors sealed under sand. He stood up and looked around the barn again. The wooden walls looked normal. The beams were old but strong. Nothing else looked unusual. If someone had built this, they had hidden it well. Tom grabbed the flashlight and pointed it at the door. The light moved across the surface, showing small scratches and marks. Not damage. More like signs of use. His heart beat faster. He reached down and grabbed the metal ring. It was cold. He pulled. At first, nothing happened. The door did not move. Tom adjusted his grip and pulled harder, using both hands. The ring did not break, but the door stayed shut. Tom stopped and took a breath. If this door was sealed, there might be a reason. It could be dangerous. It could be nothing. He did not know. But he had already come this far. He fetched a long metal bar from the truck and brought it back. He slid the bar through the ring and pressed down carefully, using it as a lever. The door gave a low sound, deep and heavy. Tom froze. He waited. Nothing else happened. He pressed again. This time, there was a soft click, followed by a slow release of pressure. The door lifted slightly, just enough to let out a breath of air from below. The air smelled dry and old, not like rot or water. That surprised him. Floodwater should have filled any space below. But this air was not damp. It was still. Tom stepped back. He let the door rest and sat on a nearby wooden crate. His mind raced. A sealed space under the barn that stayed dry during floods meant careful planning. It meant walls. It meant strength. It meant someone built this on purpose. After a few minutes, Tom stood again. He pulled the door open wider. It was heavy, but it moved smoothly on hidden hinges. A dark opening appeared beneath it. Tom pointed the flashlight inside. The beam revealed a short metal ladder leading down. The walls below were lined with thick concrete. No water stains. No cracks. Everything looked solid. Tom swallowed. He climbed down slowly. Each step felt louder than it was. When his boots touched the floor below, he turned in a full circle, shining the light around. He was standing in a large underground room. The space was clean. Too clean for something forgotten. Metal shelves lined the walls. Wooden crates were stacked neatly. A small table stood in the center. On it sat papers, sealed in plastic, and a heavy metal box. Tom walked forward carefully. He opened one of the crates. Inside were tools, but not farming tools. These were precise. Measuring devices. Strong lamps. Things used for careful work, not daily chores. He opened another crate. Inside were sealed bags filled with stones and sand, each marked with dates and symbols. Tom did not understand the symbols, but he understood one thing. This was no accident. Someone had been working here for a long time. Someone had used this room, hidden under a simple barn, away from eyes and questions. Tom picked up the papers from the table. They were old records. Maps of the land. Notes written by hand. He recognized the farm boundaries. He recognized the river line. The notes talked about soil layers. About pressure. about something beneath the ground that needed protection. Tom's hands shook slightly. He did not know exactly what he had found, but he knew it mattered. This was bigger than a ruined farm. Bigger than broken fences and lost crops. He looked at the metal box on the table. It was locked. Tom did not open it yet. He felt like once he did, there would be no turning back. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Above him, the barn stood quiet. The sand, the floods, the cheap price, all of it suddenly felt planned. Like the land was meant to be ignored. Tom climbed back up the ladder and closed the door carefully. He covered it again with sand, just as before. When he finished, the barn looked the same as it always had. But Tom was not the same. That evening, he sat on the farmhouse steps, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The valley looked peaceful, calm, like nothing strange had ever happened here. Tom knew better now. The farm was not just flooded land. It was a cover. And whatever was hidden beneath, it was waiting for its story to be told. Tom did not sleep much that night. He lay in his truck, staring at the dark roof, listening to every small sound. The wind moved through the trees. An owl called once and then went quiet. Each sound felt sharper than before. His mind kept going back to the room under the barn, the clean walls, the crates, the locked metal box. At sunrise, he got up. The sky was clear for the first time in days. Sunlight touched the farm gently, as if trying to make it look normal. Tom made tea and bread, but he barely tasted it. He knew he could not ignore what he had found. After eating, he locked the truck and walked to the house. He checked the windows and doors. Everything was still. No signs of anyone else. The farm was as alone as it had been when he arrived. Tom went to the barn again. He opened the doors slowly, looking around before stepping inside. The sand lay smooth and quiet, hiding the metal door as if nothing was there. Tom knelt down and uncovered it again, faster this time, but still careful. The metal door looked the same. Solid. Silent. He opened it and climbed down. The underground room felt cooler than the barn. The air was still dry. Tom turned on his flashlight and looked around again, slower now. He wanted to understand what this place was, not just be surprised by it. He started with the shelves. Each shelf held boxes and tools placed in neat rows. Everything had a place. Nothing was random. This was the work of someone patient and careful. Tom opened a small box. Inside were notebooks, wrapped in plastic. He opened one. The writing was neat and steady. The words were simple but clear. The writer talked about the land, the river, and the soil. There were drawings of layers underground, with marks showing where water stopped and where the ground stayed dry. Tom read slowly. The notes explained that this land was special. Beneath the surface, below the sand and mud, there was a deep layer of hard stone that blocked water. Above it, the soil could flood, but below it stayed dry and stable. That explained the room. The writer knew floods would come. They planned for it. They built below the floodline, under the barn, where no one would think to look. Tom moved to the crates of stones and sand. Each bag had a label with a date and a depth. These were samples taken from the ground over many years. The writer had studied the land carefully, watching how the river changed it, how the floods moved the sand. This was not a hiding place for something bad. It was a study. Tom felt a small sense of relief, but also confusion. Why hide this work under a barn? Why sell the farm for almost nothing? He went back to the table and picked up another stack of papers. These were letters. Most were never sent. They were written to offices, companies, and people in charge of land and water. The writer warned about future floods. They warned that the river would change its path. They said nearby farms and homes would be at risk. Many letters had notes written on them later. Ignored. Rejected. No response. Tom sighed. He understood now. Someone had tried to warn others. When no one listened, they kept working quietly, gathering proof. But time had passed. The floods came. The farm was damaged. And whoever wrote these letters was gone. Tom's eyes moved to the metal box again. He walked toward it slowly. The box was heavy and scratched, but strong. A small lock held it shut. Tom hesitated. This box felt important, like it held the final piece of the story. He did not want to rush, but he also knew he could not leave it unopened. He went back up the ladder and returned with a small set of tools from his truck. He chose carefully and worked slowly on the lock. After a few minutes, the lock opened with a soft sound. Tom lifted the lid. Inside were metal tubes, sealed at both ends, and a small device wrapped in cloth. He picked one tube up and opened it. Inside was a rolled map. Tom spread it out on the table. It showed the valley, the river, and the surrounding land. Lines marked future flood paths. Arrows showed where water would likely go during heavy rain. One area was marked clearly, circled many times. It was not Tom's farm. It was the town. The map showed that future floods would move away from the farm and toward the center of the valley, where people lived and worked. The barn was built on higher, stronger ground. The town was not. Tom felt his chest tighten. He opened the cloth around the device. It was a measuring tool, used to track ground movement and water pressure. It still worked. A small light blinked when he pressed a button. This was proof. The writer had gathered everything needed to show the truth. But no one had listened. Tom sat down slowly. He thought about the low price of the farm, about how no one wanted it, about how easy it was for this place to be forgotten. It made sense now. The farm was not sold cheap because it was useless. It was sold cheap because someone wanted it quiet. Tom did not know who that was. But he knew this information mattered. He spent the rest of the day reading everything carefully. By evening, his head ached, but his thoughts were clear. This land was not just a farm. It was a warning. When Tom climbed out of the barn, the sun was setting. The sky burned orange and red. He looked toward the town in the distance. It looked peaceful from here. Too peaceful. That night, Tom sat at the small table in the house. He cleaned the dust from the papers and laid them out neatly. He made a plan. He would not hide this truth. He would not let it be ignored again. Tomorrow, he would go to town. He would speak calmly. He would show proof. He would not shout or accuse. But he would not stay silent. The farm had been hiding something important. Now it was Tom's turn to decide what to do with it. Tom left the farm early in the morning. He packed the papers carefully in a strong bag and placed the maps between two flat boards so they would not bend. He locked the house and the barn before driving toward town. The road followed the river for a while, calm and shining under the sun. Anyone looking at it would think nothing bad could come from such quiet water. Tom knew better. The town was small. A few shops, a school, a repair garage, and a council building made of old stone. People were already outside, starting their day. Some waved when they saw Tom drive past. Most did not know him well yet. He parked near the council building and took a deep breath. Inside, the air smelled of paper and old wood. A woman at the front desk looked up and asked how she could help. Tom told her he had information about land safety and flooding. She looked surprised but pointed him toward a meeting room. There were 5 people inside. 3 men and 2 women sat around a table. They looked tired and busy. One of them asked Tom to speak. Tom placed the maps and papers on the table. He spoke calmly. He explained what he found under the barn. He showed the soil notes, the flood paths, and the records. He pointed at the map and traced the lines with his finger. He said future floods would move toward the town. At first, they listened politely. Then questions started. One man asked if Tom was an expert. Another asked who made the reports. A woman said floods had always been part of life here and nothing serious had happened yet. Tom answered honestly. He said he was not an expert, but the work was done by someone who clearly understood the land. He said waiting until something serious happened would be too late. The room grew quiet. Then one man leaned back and crossed his arms. He said the town could not panic over papers found in an old barn. He said there was no budget for big changes. He said people would worry for no reason. Another person nodded. Tom felt frustration rise, but he stayed calm. He explained again. He showed dates, patterns, and measurements. He spoke slowly, making sure his words were clear. Still, doubt filled the room. In the end, the meeting ended without action. They thanked Tom and said they would review the information later. Later felt like never. Tom left the building with heavy steps. Outside, life went on. Children walked to school. A truck delivered food to a shop. People laughed and talked. No one looked worried. That scared Tom more than anger would have. He drove back to the farm slowly, thinking. He could not force the town to listen. But he could not stay silent either. That afternoon, he began to act. He placed warning signs near the river where people walked often. Simple signs that talked about flood risk and rising water paths. He shared copies of the maps with a few farmers nearby who trusted land more than words. Some listened. Some laughed. One old farmer studied the map quietly and nodded. He said the ground near his land had been changing too. Another said his well water tasted different after the last flood. Small signs. That evening, clouds gathered in the sky, dark and thick. The air grew heavy. Tom stood on his porch and watched the river. Rain started slowly. By night, it was pouring. Tom stayed awake, checking the river level with a flashlight. The water rose faster than usual. Not dangerously yet, but faster. Near midnight, he heard engines in the distance. Town workers drove along the river, checking barriers. They had not expected such strong rain. Tom watched the water move. It followed the lines on the map. By morning, parts of the road near town were underwater. Shops near the river closed. People gathered, confused and worried. Tom drove into town again. This time, no one stopped him. People recognized him as the man who talked about floods. Some asked questions. Some looked afraid. He showed the maps again. This time, hands reached for them. The council called an emergency meeting. Tom spoke again, but this time the room was tense and silent. Outside, rain hit the windows hard. The sound matched the fear in the room. They believed him now. Plans started quickly. Roads were blocked. People near the river were told to move to higher ground. Sandbags were placed where possible. It was not perfect, but it was something. By evening, the rain slowed. The town was shaken but safe. The damage was real, but not terrible. And people knew it could have been worse. Tom returned to the farm late that night. He stood in the barn and looked down at the hidden door under the sand. The farm had done its job. The secret was no longer buried. But Tom knew the story was not finished yet. The rain stopped 2 days later. The river slowly returned to its banks, leaving behind wet roads, broken fences, and tired people. The town looked different now. Not destroyed, but changed. Everyone had seen how close danger had come. Tom stayed on the farm during those days. He watched the water move away, just like the maps showed. The barn stayed dry. The ground under it stayed firm. Everything the hidden notes had promised came true. On the third morning, a car drove up the farm road. Then, another. Then a truck. Tom stepped out of the house and watched as people from town gathered near the barn. Some were council members. Some were farmers. Some were just neighbors who wanted answers. The same man who had doubted Tom before stepped forward. He did not look proud now. He thanked Tom for speaking when no one wanted to listen. He admitted they were wrong to wait. Others nodded. No one argued. They asked to see the place under the barn. Tom did not hesitate. He opened the barn doors and cleared the sand once more. When the metal door appeared, people gasped softly. Many had lived here their whole lives and never guessed something like this was beneath their feet. Tom opened the door and led them down. The underground room felt smaller with many people inside. Flashlights moved across shelves, papers, and crates. Some people touched the walls, surprised by how strong and dry they were. The old farmer who had believed Tom early stood quietly, reading the notes on the table. His eyes softened. He said the person who built this place loved the land. No one disagreed. The council decided quickly. The room would be protected and studied. Experts would be called. The maps would be shared with nearby areas. New flood plans would be made. And Tom would be part of it. Not because he wanted power or praise, but because he understood the land now better than anyone else. News spread fast. People from other towns came to see the farm. They called it many things. The flooded farm. The warning farm. The farm that saved the valley. Tom did not like big names. He still worked quietly. He fixed fences. He cleaned the fields. He planted where the soil allowed. Slowly, green returned to the land. One afternoon, while cleaning the house, Tom found something new. Behind a loose board in the old cupboard, there was an envelope. Inside was a short letter. The writing matched the notebooks from below. The letter said the writer had grown tired. Tired of warning people who did not listen. Tired of fighting offices that cared more about money than safety. They wrote that one day, someone honest would find the farm. Someone patient. Someone willing to listen to the land. The letter ended with simple words. If you found this, then the farm chose you. Tom sat down and held the letter for a long time. He understood now why the farm felt heavy when he first arrived. Why it felt like it was waiting. It was never cursed. It was careful. Months passed. The town built new paths for water. Homes near the river were moved. Fields were changed. Floods still came, but they did not bring fear anymore. People were ready. The barn stayed standing. The room under it stayed quiet. Tom continued to live simply. He never sold the farm, even when offers came. He knew its value was not in money. One evening, as the sun set, Tom stood by the barn and watched the sky turn gold. The land looked peaceful again. But now, peace came with knowledge. The farm had hidden something once. Now it stood open, honest, and strong. And because one man listened, many others were safe. The farm had finally spoken. And this time, the world listened.